beautiful, that's not my line. What's going on, Barefoot Nation? This week I'm giving you an update on all of my hardy palms, which I haven't done a video of all of my palms to date, probably mostly because that wouldn't have been too interesting, but anyways guys, let's get into it. These potted palms here are not hardy to zone 6. Basically, no matter how you slice it. Now, there is a hardy grapefruit, or zone 7 hardy grapefruit, possibly 6B hardy. There is a hardy agave, which is zone 5 hardy even. But this baby windmill palm, this is a Charlotte windmill palm. And then this Serenoa repens var cinerea are not hardy. The Serenoa is, I've had this palm for years. I'm actually probably going to donate it to my local botanical gardens because, you know, I don't know. I love the plant. It's gorgeous, but it's, I don't know. We'll see. This Trachycarpus is beautiful, and it should be a large frond type Trachycarpus that was selected because it should be hardier than your typical Fortunii once larger. So we shall see. Yeah, I planted it actually directly from the 3-inch cup that it came in into that 3-gallon container. And you can see that the amount of growth is pretty spectacular, considering. So yeah, so that's that guy. You can't really tell that there's a palm in here, so I'll go through here quickly. But this is a Sable brazoriensis that I've also been growing since 2019. It was in a lot of shade because over the summer I had an alocasia and a salvia growing right there. So this here is a Sable minor, and this is actually the first Sable minor that I planted, or one of the first Sable minor that I planted here at in this garden. It's in kind of a not a lot of shade during the summer, but it's definitely got some shade during the growing season. So hopefully the petioles are going to stretch, but it is definitely growing into an absolutely gorgeous palm. It looked kind of shabby for most of the summer, you could say, up until probably August when the heat was pretty consistent, you know. And by shabby, I mean kind of these fronds that are a little bit tattered and, you know, winter beaten, with some cold damage on the stem and that sort of thing. But unexpectedly, it did send up a little flower. I don't think there's any good seed developing on it. In fact, there was, but it probably got burned off and cold, which is fine. I don't really expect Sables to be producing seed in this climate with this short of a summer. But again, just an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous palm. That was planted out from a 3-gallon pot in 2021, I believe. Should talk about the yuccas, of course, too, but this, even though they're not really palms. So you can see here, this is the Sable minor that I planted out from a 7-gallon pot last February. It's doing very well, and it never really had a ton of cold damage, amazingly, and it even put out a couple new fronds. You can see that there's a couple plants growing in that little cluster. So I'd imagine that the grower had just put a couple seeds in the same cell, and that's kind of how that happens. But even though that's not my preferred method to have Sables grow, because I actually don't want them to look too yucca-like. Admittedly, as I've grown these palms more, they don't like, but basically what I'm saying is I don't want to have just the frond tips visible to where you can't see that. I guess I don't know if that's a rachis or the little kind of where they all suture together. So anyway, regardless, this palm is doing very well, and it's even grown some this year. So I kind of get it with planting the bigger palms. Also take note of the beautiful carpet of Saxifraga stolonifera, which was planted out from a 3-inch container first thing in spring. Actually, technically late winter. So that plant has done very well. I absolutely love it. And basically anywhere there's a shady pocket, you can be sure that I'll be propagating that and tucking it into those corners because it's just a beautiful evergreen ground cover. So I'll have to talk about this sable from a distance once I find a good angle, just because the water feature will be loud. See, this is another winter planted sable. This is again, sable minor, same grower. I mean, it really gets a lot of shade, so it's probably gonna grow slower than the rest, but we'll see. I also decided to plant another sable right here. Originally I was planning on having them be kind of like a semicircle of them, but I don't know if that's gonna pan out as far as looks, having it actually look like a semicircle of palms. So this one I've had in a pot for quite a while, so it looks pretty bad. It didn't put on any new growth, which again is fully expected. I just kind of stuck it in the ground in September. So I might have to protect it some, but I do think it's pretty protected from the Miscanthus cosmopolitan, which again is probably gonna grow into that, is definitely gonna grow into that palm. So I might have to be hacking at the Miscanthus to, not hacking at it because I really like that grass, but kind of just dividing pieces out and encouraging the Miscanthus to grow in kind of a funky pattern, not the perfectly radial form that they normally have, because I need to favor the sable minor. I guess while we're on the patio area here, I will highlight these beautiful yucca color guards, which are the winter focal points. So color guard yucca should be hardy fully into zone 4. So for me here in zone 6 in Western New York, the yucca color guard should be perfectly fine to have in a container all year. These plants should remain fully evergreen or mostly evergreen. You know, some of their growth might kind of droop down, kind of like that. But again, whether you think that yuccas look tropical or modern or xeriscape or however, it's cool to have such an architectural plant be so cold hardy. I'm debating if I leave these in containers all year for like the next few years and then just have to plant them in the ground, because I think that if I planted them in the ground just anywhere on the property, they would probably succumb to root rot because it's still a pretty heavy wet clay. I absolutely love how this container grouping, and well, that's not a container, but how this has kind of transitioned from summer into autumn. This whole scene right here is actually probably a pretty good thumbnail, minus my sandals in the background. The last couple sables that I have to discuss here with you guys are a couple of Sable Minor McCurtains. And so Sable Minor McCurtain is supposed to be the hardiest cultivar, or yeah, cultivar, seed strain, ecotype, however you want to word it, of this species. So this plant I've actually had since 2019. I got it from Plant Delights Nursery, and it was in a, not like their typical 3-inch cup or their typical 3-inch container. It was deeper, which is good because sables have tap roots. This palm being planted first thing in spring, I don't expect much growth out of it for maybe a year or two because, again, sables form their trunk underground. And so while that trunk is forming, I don't expect much top growth. You know, a frond or two or whatever, but not very much. It's worth noting too, as far as transplanting sables, before you plant them, make sure that they're in the area that you want, or, you know, transplant them really as soon as possible if they're not in the area you want, because once they get established, and this some people have been successful digging out sables, and maybe this is overblown, but everything I've heard and read says that Sable Minor and Palmetto, once you plant them, you gotta establish them and leave them there for the rest of their life because they do not like being transplanted because of that underground trunk / taproot. as of this morning, I cut down a lot of the gladiolas and irises in this area because I have another little baby Sable Minor McCurtain right here, which now that the sun angle is so low, I actually had to cut down these irises here and the glads and all that because they were shading sable, and I want to make sure that, again, now that it's cooler outside and the sun is ever more precious, that little guy, you can't even really see him, that this little guy is getting more sun because, again, sunlight is more precious now. This guy I just decided to stick in the ground here because in the spring it was potted in a 3-gallon container, and I thought it was dead, and so when I pulled it out of the container, it was very much so not dead. It had a weird, as you can see, it's kind of adapted to being in sun, but this all was underground. It was a couple inches under the soil, so I kind of straightened it out, exposed it to the light, which was good that the irises were shading it most of the summer, and now she's off to the races. So that is the last sable that I'm going to share with you guys. The other type of palm that I have here are needle palms, and you're probably also looking at these palm-like plants here. These are actually cold hardy orchids. The genus is Blatilla, and so this is a plant that's technically marginally hardy, so I'm not going to cut those down because I don't want cold air to be able to work its way down into the rhizome. I pretty much do that with every single marginally hardy perennial, so the reason that it still looks pretty, I don't know, bad after frost is that this, all the gingers and all of the gingers and the giant calla lily and all these plants are basically just going to get frost battered into the ground, fully into dormancy, and they won't have any, they'll be fully sealed off. They won't have any way for cold air to get in to those stems. I know I'm talking about palms, but I'm sure you're wondering why my garden looks messy. Well, probably not if you've been here a while, but yeah, so that's why they're all like that. I do have some sable seedlings I'll show you over there that I forgot to mention while I was talking about the other sables. So anyway, back to the needle palm. This was a beautiful 7-gallon plant that the mother plant died because I decided to protect it with snow, and apparently needle palms hate being protected with snow in my climate. So the mother plant spear pulled terribly. You know, you need to protect the mother plant the first year so that doesn't happen. Needle palms, once they're established, are pretty tough, and they shouldn't need protection. Probably the route that I'm going to end up taking is just leaving it to its own devices. But I mean, all things considered, all these pups really have grown super well. I will note that I did not cut the mother trunk out, so that is still existing, and I have a sense that there's energy in there that the pups are kind of drawing off of. While I was talking about how I'm not cutting back some of my more marginal perennials, you might have noticed this guy. This is just one of these Dracaena spikes, or one of those centerpiece plants that are traditional in kind of old school planters, like one of these in the geraniums. I just decided to stick this in the ground last year. You can see the stumps of my cannas. So I decided to stick this in the ground last year, and I am absolutely floored with how much growth it's put on. You can see it's already taller than the greenhouse little cold frame thingy that I use. I don't really know what I'm gonna do with this because I kind of want to protect it now, but at the same time, I don't know. Drop a comment down below. Tell me what I should do. I really didn't expect it to do this well. And you can see in the cold frame here, I have all of my potted plants, a fig tree, and then another one of these little guys here. Anyways, guys, something that is a needle palm success story, that this beautiful needle palm here has overcome spear pull. So this was actually planted against the foundation where that beautiful little baby sable miner McCurtain is, and it had bad spear pull, and the pups were pretty small in the spring, like probably that size. And so I opted to dig it out with a garden fork, so I retained all of its roots and that it had produced outside the container root ball, and I transplanted it over here. So now what this will afford the palm is it's still a pretty protected location, buffered from the western wind, but it's not going to get the snow cover. The snow does not accumulate over in this area. So this needle palm, I'm actually pretty happy with how all these guys grow. So they definitely in the right spot. So it's not going to put on feet of growth in a single season, obviously, but you know, when they are happy, they will definitely grow much better, much faster than people think. Especially if you set your expectations to where it's going to take a decade to really look like something, and then obviously it'll surprise you. I have a menagerie of potted sable miners. As you can tell, I do very well with sables because I can protect them with snow. So that's a species of palm that I really enjoy. I enjoy growing them. I think they're beautiful. But also too, again, they jibe nicely with how I like to protect tropical plants in the wintertime with mulch and snow. And again, I'll see how the needle palms do. But this guy here, that I'm sure you guys are looking at, this is one of two Emerald Island Giant sable miners. And so this is, again, it's another plant from Plant Delight's nursery that this was in a little tiny 3-inch container back in like I want to say I got it in 2020. I might have gotten it at the same time as I got the McCurtain, but anyway, I've had it for maybe 2 years or something, and every year I've potted it up from, you know, whatever, from the 3-inch container until now. This is actually in probably a number 10, kind of squat number 10 container. And so, yeah, this is the kind of nicer looking of the two, starting to get some really nice developed fronds. You can tell this is going to be a big palm because if you look at the immature leaves, they're already, you know, probably 1.5 feet, 2 feet high, and versus some of these other sables with this kind of leaf structure, or like when the leaves are at this level of maturity, they're not nearly that tall. And it has gotten a decent amount of sun. So that's not a shade thing. Right here is the other Emerald Island Giant sable. You can see a potentially more mature frond coming out there, which is awesome. The other plants and weeds in the container, I have a yellow calla lily. I believe the variety is Monte Carlo, but don't hold me to that. I've got some Verbena Homestead purple, and then whatever other weeds are growing in the pot. I do see what I call springweed in here, and that has to go because springweed has a seed pod the way that when the seeds are ripe, it is a cool season weed. When the seeds are ripe, they will literally, if you touch them, they'll spring like 10 feet, or not 10 feet, but they have literal springs in the seeds, which evolutionarily is incredible, but from a gardener's perspective, I want to kill them when I see them. So I'm, you know, pretty lax with my weeding, as you can see, but when it comes to certain weeds like turf grass, springweed, and a few others, I try to remove them when I see them. Here you can see some potted sable Louisianas. These guys here are pretty commonly available. You can even see that this one here is starting to put out some kind of not mature fronds. It's probably going to be a frond similar in shape to this guy. But this palm here is, again, I got it out from a tiny plant. Every year their old growth gets kind of spotted and cold damaged, even just with like light frost, which we have had. But what's interesting is the new growth is usually pretty, doesn't really show as much cold damage. And so when you're talking about a plant like sable minor and needle palms, both of which are native to the United States, one of the important undertones here is you're seeing all these cultivars that are a result of genetic diversity, and that genetic diversity is being preserved in the form of naming cultivars. So cultivars are great, but clearly if there wasn't the genetic diversity, which whatever created that, I don't know, drop it in the comments if you do. These adaptations which make them slightly different, grow larger, be dwarf. So another gorgeous plant that has fully recovered from spear pull is this Trachycarpus Taylor's form. So this plant is really cool. This probably has some Trachycarpus wagnerianus genetics in it, because the fronds at maturity are going to be stiffer and smaller than kind of your typical Fortunii. But again, this plant has grown tremendously this season. And again, so after it had bad spear pull and it was unfrozen from the patio, potted, mind you, it actually kicked out a frond which has now died back. But this palm had then produced this, which is the palm showing that it has grown past its condition, its spear pull. And basically what I did is I dumped in a heckin' ton of hydrogen peroxide and a little bit of copper fungicide as well. But the most important thing is after I did that treatment, I had it indoors as a houseplant. But basically that's where it sat. And miraculously, this guy has recovered. So next year I'm gonna plant this in bigger container yet, and hopefully encourage it to continue to grow into a full-sized Trachycarpus. Eventually getting planted in the ground and having to do the whole boxing, thing that I'm still pretty, that I still have mixed feelings about. Can't wait to see what it does next year, and I'm still debating how much cold I'm gonna give it. Probably nowhere near what it had last year, even though it probably can take it. Well, it almost definitely can take it. Sometimes there's a thing called the death spiral with plants that basically, if let's say a stressor like that almost kills this palm, they need to have full recovery and quite a bit of time to fully recover from their stress. And if they don't get that, you're gonna just slowly kill them. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something about hardy palms. I still have a lot to learn. Thankfully, I've had a lot of people who, like Banana Joe, and a lot of folks who have helped me out as Sandor. A lot of you guys. There's a great community of hardy palm growers out there, and yeah, it's cool to be kind of a part of that. Regardless, let me know down in the comments what you guys have as far as palms. Maybe you don't have palms. Are you interested in them? If you like this video, be sure to drop it a big ol' thumbs up, just like a soul. And if you want to see more content just like this on Thursdays and or Sundays, so every 7 to 10 days, weekly-ish. Regardless, if you want to see all the notifications, be sure to hit that bell symbol. Thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to see you next week on Thursday or Sunday. Peace! That didn't work.